Dan, and sitting in for Amy this morning, they call him Greek Lightning. He is Chicago Tribune columnist John Cass. And John, yesterday, a judge delayed the sentencing of one former U.S. House Speaker, Denny Hastert. It's supposed to be the end of next month. Now it'll be April 8th. Reports that Denny Hastert nearly died at the end of last year when he suffered, a minor stroke.
You can't see this. I'm doing the tiny violin. Okay.
Yeah, well, the other thing that's interesting about this is not just kind of a pro forma extension of or a delay in the sentencing. The federal government, for the first time, used the plural of victim. There are victims, plural, in this case, said Assistant U.S. Attorney Stephen Block. They deserve closure in arguing against the delay in sentencing. Victims, plural, and not victims in terms of multiple banks where he was making structured withdrawals. Victims in terms of those people that were potentially getting paid or those people that weren't getting paid that Denny Hastert apparently, it seems from what the federal government has intimated to this point,
to the Trib.
Abused.
Sexually.
Yes.
Look, I was cured of republicanism in Illinois with Bill Cellini, who was Blagojevich's money guy. I was Bob Shalander, Hastert, Thompson, Edgar. Okay? I'm done with them. They're just the whole crew.
Well, the question is
sickening.
Well, that's part of it. There's no question. But the other question is, what's the U.S. Attorney's Office doing? Why are they recommending 6 months in prison? Why not, if you can't get him for what you know he did, because the statute has run, because one alleged victim is deceased, then why not go for the max on the charges, those structured bank withdrawal charges that you do have him dead to rights on, that he is pleading out to, because each of those charges comes with a 10-year prison sentence. Why not go for the max for this guy to send a message about what you know is the underlying truth? To answer that question and help us make sense of what the U.S. Attorney's Office is doing, we're now joined by famed Harvard Law professor Alan Dershowitz. Professor Dershowitz, thanks again for joining us. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me on.
So to my question about the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Hastert case, again, if you can't get him for what you know he did, why not take the approach of getting Al Capone for tax evasion and go for the max on what you can get him on?
Well, I think there are a lot of people who are inclined to think that way. I think certainly O.J. Simpson probably got an excessive sentence for a relatively minor crime because the judge and others thought he had gotten away with a double murder, the Al Capone story. But, we have statute of limitations for a reason, and I don't think it would be right to misuse the federal structuring laws in order to try to undo the statute of limitations. He's an old man. He's a sick man. There are probably multiple victims here in two senses. Anybody who's a victim of abuse obviously is a victim, but if in fact they were trying to blackmail him and extort him and he paid hush money to prevent that, then, you have to ask yourself whether he too is a victim of an extortion. That doesn't justify or excuse what he did, what he's alleged to have done, what he pleaded guilty to, but it may explain why the sentence seems fairly low. Also, his age is a factor, his health. Is this a crime that deserves essentially the death penalty or life imprisonment, or should a person of his age be able to see the light at the end of the tunnel? Compassion does play a role. Now, you have to have compassion for his victims as well. But right now it's he who is on trial and he who's being sentenced. So I don't see anything surprising about a 6-month sentence.
So you think
and I think it's fairly typical.
Is this some sort of deal? He gets a low sentence and then he's flipped on people who may have extorted him? Is that where we're going?
I doubt that.
Well, I heard you say. I thought that's what you were saying.
I think he's pleaded guilty in order to avoid having to bring some of the victims out and having to, redo some of the old allegations. I think it's an attempt to bring closure. The government knows who it was he paid.
Right.
So they probably have whatever information they may want to have about any extortion. It's very complicated. Also, I get concerned when I hear about criminalization of policy differences. Whenever politicians are indicted, people cheer and because there are so many politicians that are corrupt. But we have to make sure that we're not punishing them because we disagree with their politics. We're not punishing them because we don't like what they did while they're in office. I think it's very important that we punish people precisely for what they are accused of. In this case, it's structuring. Yes, we know there's a history about why he's structured. But in general, I think the Al Capone approach is not the best approach to justice.
Come to Chicago I'd like you to stay here for about 30 years and let's see.
Hey, wait a minute.
Right.
I live in Florida now, and let me tell you stories about what goes on down here. So, and I come from Boston, and I was right near Providence, Rhode Island. So Chicago claims no monopoly on corruption.
No.
We have plenty of it.
Well, we're talking to Professor Alan Dershowitz, of course, famed Harvard law professor. Professor Dershowitz, but let me pursue this line a little bit in terms of not prosecuting politicians for policy difference. Agreed. But he is a former U.S. Speaker of the House, the longest-serving Republican Speaker of the House. He is a public official. What about the idea, okay, if you don't want to go for 20 years to be punitive on the structuring charges that he's pleading out to, what about the idea that as part of the plea bargain, part of his 6-month sentence, that he allocutes to the underlying extortion that was going on, why he was paying the $3.5 million, why he was making those illegal structured withdrawals? What about that?
Well, you have to ask the following question: would he have pleaded? Remember, he had the option of going to trial, and has a good lawyer, and people win cases all the time. And generally, when the U.S. attorney strikes a plea bargain, it doesn't do it out of compassion. It does it by balancing the chances of winning against the chances of losing. If they had said, we're giving you 20 years, there's no way he would have pleaded.
No, but I'm not talking about the 20 years. I'm saying 6 months, but here's the other thing. You have to allocute.
And he might have said no. He might have said, if I have to allocute, then I might as well go to trial, because worse comes to worse, they will be able to prove what the reason was, and I'll be horribly embarrassed, but I'm being embarrassed by allocuting anyway. So, you have to ask yourself the question, what is the most the prosecution could have gotten while getting him to plead? Now, it may be they could have gotten him to allocute. I don't know the answer to that question, but when you ask the question why the prosecutor didn't seek more, you always have to ask, did they have enough evidence to be sure of winning the case? Or was the plea bargain a good thing from the prosecutor?
Well, I mean, I think this is the path of least resistance. I mean, you know better than I do, the conviction rate of federal prosecutors, it's north of 95%. They have them dead to rights.
And the reason it is north of 95% is because they get people to plead all the time. If they were threatening 20-year sentences, they wouldn't get as many pleas, and they wouldn't have the 95%. So in order to keep the 95%, you have to have reasonable plea bargaining in which both sides get something out of the deal. You walk away from a plea bargain. I've done many of them in my life. You walk away from a plea bargain. Neither side is ever satisfied. Each side says, we probably could have done a little better. But it's a bargain that's struck, and it's struck based on the comparative strength of both sides.
He's connected, and he was a Speaker of the House, and he's going to do 6 months for this, right?
If he lasts.
So whatever the legal theories, that's it.
I don't think very many people do more than 6 months for structuring.
No,
structuring is not regarded as, it's a relatively new crime. The basic crime is you can't deposit more than a certain amount of money without reporting it. And so structuring is an adjunct to that says if you begin to deposit lots of smaller checks in an effort to avoid that, then you're guilty of the crime. It's not Al Capone. That's the point.
I think the issue is for a lot of us here, and people who are Republicans, by the way, is that part of justice is the truth, and we don't have the truth, and it leaves people, myself included, unsatisfied.
Yeah, but that's part of the role of the media. The media's role is to bring out the truth. Journalists do the investigation. The criminal justice system, its relationship to truth is very ambiguous.
Right,
if
exactly.
the criminal justice system
Yes.
was interested only in truth, we wouldn't have the privilege against self-incrimination. We wouldn't have the exclusionary rule. we wouldn't have better 10 guilty go free than one innocent be wrongly confined.
Yeah.
The criminal justice system balances truth, privacy, fairness. The media is interested only in truth. So you guys do your job. Dig up, find the truth, publish it, and then let the criminal justice system operate in its imperfect way.
All right, Alan Dershowitz, before we let you go, I have to ask you this question. I saw you a couple cycles back when you came to town to do a fundraiser for Joel Pollack, who was running for Congress against Jan Schakowsky, what you said, one of your best law students ever. And then I've heard you refer to Ted Cruz as one of your, if not your brightest law student ever at Harvard. One of your best laws. I mean, when do you just say, you know what, I'm a conservative. I'm with Ted Cruz and Joel Pollack and all my great law students.
I'm not with Ted Cruz. I'm with Hillary Clinton. I'm a liberal Democrat. I just don't like Jan Schakowsky. I think she is a pretender. I think she claims to be pro-Israel, for example, and virtually all of her votes don't seem to move in that direction. She supports J Street, which is an anti-Israel organization. So I thought Joel Pollack would make a much better congressperson than Jan Schakowsky. I have supported Republicans on occasion, but I'm a liberal Democrat. I'm a Ted Kennedy Democrat. I was very close to him. I'm going to support Hillary Clinton, and I'm hoping the Republicans put up a good candidate. I would not vote for Ted Cruz. I introduced him not so long ago to an event, and I said, Ted belongs in the Senate. The United States needs one Senator Ted Cruz, not more than one, but one Senator Ted Cruz, and that's where he belongs in the United States Senate. I would not vote for him for president.
Okay, well,
so I'm still a liberal.
We'll agree. I'm sorry to hear that. We'll agree to disagree, but I do appreciate how outspoken you are about the totalitarianism on college campuses. So
it's horrible. What's going on?
Keep speaking about that.
Is run amok. I will. Thank you.
Alan Dershowitz, Harvard law professor. Thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate your time.
Oh, sure. Be well. Bye.
And he joined us on the turnkey.pro answer line.
There's only one.